Hey, do you wish your drywall finishing skills could be a little bit better? Maybe you'd like some tips and tricks that would help you along? Well, I'm going to do that in today's video. All right, I'm shooting this video from sunny and warm Quartzsite, Arizona. It's currently 67 degrees outside here, and we got about a 13-mile-an-hour breeze, but it feels nice. Now I'm going to get on to teaching you guys some tips and tricks of many things I've discovered that novices do wrong or could do better. And this comes from 40 years of doing drywall and teaching many people along the way, including millions of you here on YouTube. So first, why me? Why listen to me? Let me give you just a brief rundown on my drywall experience. In 1969, at the age of 8, I first walked on a pair of drywall stilts, spotting nails for my dad. My dad and my uncles, a bunch of them did drywall. It's a family thing. He at one time had a business where he employed about 50 people doing condos and that in Vail and ski areas up there. We lived in Eagle, Colorado. So I kind of grew up in this. As soon as I was old enough to drive, I had a car, Volkswagen Bug, and I showed up on a job site every day after work to do drywall. Now I mostly did finishing, but I did a lot of hanging too, because my dad just did it all from start to finish. He got to where he narrowed down to just him and one or two other crews because he got tired of that big rat race. We moved to Grand Junction, Colorado. He actually did drywall most of his life too. Then he moved into doing general construction, home building. So I got some experience with him through that. But I was doing drywall full time in the summers of 78, 79. And then I joined the military. I was active duty for only a couple of years, then I was back into drywall. So overall, I have roughly 40 years of drywall finishing experience. And the last 20 of that, I focused on drywall repairs. And that's some of the hardest things to get right. And that's what a lot of you are probably trying to do. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on that. Now, hey, if you notice the background back here, I'm going to show you some pictures of where we're at. We have, in this area, has some of the most gorgeous sunsets and some other cool scenery. So I've got my green screen up. If you don't see green, you're going to see some cool pictures as a background. So what we're going to do is base this off of the ebook I've got available. And that ebook might help a lot of you. I'm not going to cover everything in that ebook because it's pretty extensive. It's up to, I think, 39 pages. I've got a lot of really good illustrations and pictures in there. So I'm just going to go over some of the highlights, some of the things that I see you guys doing the most often. But if you want to know even more, I cover everything in this book from what the contractor might be doing wrong, both in his contract to you, the drywall contractor, and some of the mistakes they might be trying to get away with, or just maybe they're doing it and they don't know better. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I suggest you learn what's right and wrong and how you handle that. Because you don't want to go in and try and tell a drywall contractor how to do his job unless you're sure he's doing something that's not right. So be careful with that one. So we're going to cover things like if you're going to hire a contractor to do your work, and then I'm going to give you the mistakes if you're going to do the work. But let's start with, if you're going to hire a contractor, one of the most important things is don't do verbal, get everything in writing. If it's a small job, $200 or $300, it's usually not such a big deal. But you'll find you'll have far less disagreements than that if you just get everything in writing. So my policy was anything over $400, I automatically wrote up a contract, and it looked kind of like this. And I'm putting this in this ebook so you can look through some of these sample pages of what I used to write up, some of the things I used to cover. So if you're a contractor, you might want to pull some tips and tricks out of there. But if you're a contractor, you're going to find you'll just argue a lot less with your customers if you just ask them a lot of questions about what type of texture, and this goes both ways for the homeowner and the contractor. What type of texture do you want if you're doing a bigger project like a whole room? How soon will it start? How long will it take? And these need to be things you try and stick to. So don't tell somebody you'll start on the 7th and you show up on the 15th and think that they're just going to be okay with that. That's what the contract's for. And then if you say it'll take 5 days, if it takes 6, everybody usually understands that. Sometimes it happens. But if you say it's going to take 5 days and you take 2 weeks, expect somebody to be upset. And if you're the homeowner, you've got a right to be. That contractor will help you with that. Research the contractor and make sure you're hiring a reputable one. I'll give you some tips in that, but I've also got a separate ebook on how to hire the right contractor. It goes into a lot more detail. So you might want to pick that one up to make sure you hire the right contractor. And as a contractor, you might want to pick it up to see what the homeowner should be looking for and ways you can make yourself more credible to them. Okay, once the work starts, if you're the homeowner, make sure you know what the work should look like. Like when the hangers come in and they're hanging the drywall, there's a certain way they should be breaking butt joints. And I'll show you some good examples and some bad examples. How they break it over a window and a door, how they break it in the middle of a wall. It matters. It will give you a better job if you understand these things. Then when it comes to the taping and finishing, just try and understand the basic procedure for how it goes, which for taping it's generally pre-filling. Make sure that dries or hardens because they should be using fast setting joint compound. Then you move on to the taping step, and the taping really should dry completely before you start coating it. I've heard of guys trying to turn around and coat it right away. The manufacturers of all these products say not to do that. And I believe it's a bad idea for several reasons. One is you need to allow the tape coat to shrink and dry. It's going to shrink a little bit, and when it dries, it's going to form that bond. And if you don't let it dry before you start coating it, you may not get as good of a bond, and you're not letting it shrink and then filling in that shrinkage. You're putting mud on it and it's going to shrink a little bit more. So understand the process. And then there's the texture. Now, if you want a specific texture, you need to make sure that's in the contract, what you want. Like if you want it to match another room closely, I always say closely because you can't just match a texture perfectly that's somewhere else or from a sample. It varies a little bit every time. All you can do is get close. And if you're doing a repair, you're doing a blend. And so it's got to be really close. The best way to make sure you get the texture you want, if you can't say, look at this wall over here and match something close to bedroom number 2. If you just want something that you don't even have in the house, get them to do a sample for you. I used to do sample boards like these, and if you got sample texture, show it to them. It should be painted because it looks different when it's painted. And then they know basically what they're going to get, and you know as a homeowner what you're going to get. Take a picture of that, put it in the contract that says we'll apply a texture that closely matches the sample shown to the customer in person. Okay, some of the things I'm going to cover in this ebook is common mistakes homeowners and novices make. And one of the most common I see is using cheap tools or the wrong tools. I know you guys want to save money, but if you go out and buy the cheapest tools you can, you may get inferior work because they're harder to use even for me. And I can make most any of them work, but I can tell you I've used somebody else's cheap tools a time or two. My plumbing friend, hey Andy, and those tools, they sucked. I got it done, but quality tools make a difference. I'm going to put links to tools in this ebook that I would recommend, so you'll have a good start if you're looking to buy something of quality without breaking the bank. Using the wrong tools. I see a lot of homeowners and novices using gimmicks or using the wrong tool at the wrong time. And a good example of that is if you're doing a repair or you're coating something, say 14, 16 inches wide, and you're trying to do it with a 6-inch knife, it's not the best way. I go into more detail in the ebook. Also, using the wrong materials. You know, it's kind of confusing out there. There's all these different pre-mixed joint compounds, powdered ones, hot mud, Durabond, all that, all these terms that may confuse you. So I'm going to try and give you some pointers to narrow it down, because it doesn't need to be that complicated. But definitely stay away from gimmicks. If you don't see the pros using it, there's probably a reason why. Most gimmicks are geared towards the novice, and it's made to make them feel like, ooh, this will be easier. It's so hard to do drywall, so they come out with tools that make it look like it'll be easier. Once in a while they pull that off. A lot of times it's just a gimmick. Best thing is stay away from it. Learn how to use the proper tools, the proper techniques. You'll get a better job. And then my final pet peeve on this, maybe not final, but I hate when I see novices and beginners learning from other novices. I get that you guys want to share what you did, but try it. If you're putting out videos like that, make it clear that you're a novice. This is what you came up with. It seemed to work for you. But a lot of times you guys are doing things that aren't the best way. I can guarantee you're getting substandard work. It's not gonna look very good, or it may not last really well, or there may be other issues where if you put mud on too thick, for example, it doesn't like to dry. It dries from the outside in. It may still be wet underneath 2 or 3 weeks from now when you paint it, and you just get problems. So when you're learning, try and pick a YouTube channel that seems to be a pro. That's the real, you know, would you learn heart surgeon from somebody that watched it on Matlock or something? No, go learn from the pros. Now, I try and teach all this stuff, as you know, everything from taping, finishing, coating, repairs, tips and tricks. I also have some ebooks in that are going to be available on my store. It's that kiltedguystore.com. Pretty simple. There's books on spraying texture, how to adjust it and tweak it, how to pick the right contractor, these common mistakes, and more. And these books, I really tried to write them to help you guys out more than these videos can possibly do for you. Plus, you can always come back to it and reread a section. It may be a lot harder to go find that video. You remember you watched one 3 months ago. Where was it? You know, I've done that. You got an ebook, you can always go back, click on it, go to the section you need, relearn it. Plus, I'm putting a lot of links to videos of mine that will help you. So if I tell you do such and such a certain way, I try and put a link to one of my videos that shows what I'm talking about. There you go, you'll be able to find just what you need. The other advantage to this ebook is it walks you through it in kind of a logical order and gives you all of the information you need pretty much in one spot. When you try and learn it from videos, you often need to watch 10, 15, or 20 videos to get it all, and it's kind of, you're getting it out of order. It's harder to learn that way. I still advise you to watch the videos, but if you got a guide like this, it'll help kind of keep things in order, keep things straight for you. So another video or thing amateurs do a lot is trying to repair or float things out like a repair. Honestly, most repairs, let's say it's a doorknob size hole. You think it's this big, your repair should be this big. Wrong. Most all repairs need to be about double to triple, sometimes more, wider than the repair. I explain that in some of these illustrations like you see here, give you a better idea why we're doing that and what it takes. So you also want to use the widest knife you can for that reason. I explain that more in the book too. But the videos that I point you to will also show you why a wide knife matters. I also explain how much pressure to put on a knife. It's really important. You can't just put it up there and wipe across. I explain how much pressure to put on it, how to feather the edges, what that means, and how to lean your knife over as you go, and so on. So there's a lot more to it than just using a wider knife. But when you are using those smaller knives, I see often you're overworking it and taking too long, letting it thicken up, partially dry out, and you're just overworking, it's a bad idea. I put it on one pass, I wipe it off, basically one pass. Come as close to that as you can. Also, I cover, you don't want to over sand. That's another common one. I see a lot of novices put mud on and they just sand and sand and sand until it's almost back down to the plain drywall tape because they see minor defects. Well, all you want to do is sand until you get the right contour. When you've got that right shape to that area you're floating, stop. If there's defects, you fix them with more mud. You can't sand a defect off and sand off the right contour of mud because you're just going to have to put it back, so you keep going back and forth and back and forth. So sand it to the contour, get the dust off, fix the defects, maybe put another coat on if you have to, and then sand it again. But minimize your sanding to trying to take off the high points like lap marks, little goobers, and drywall boogers, stuff like that. You just want to knock off the kind of defects. And if you did put it on too heavy, which a lot of you might do, it's okay to sand it down, but you're not going for dead flat, and I show you that in these illustrations. Another one is, don't try to assume you're going to hide all your defects with texture. Don't even try to. Now, I know how to. I can do a skip trowel on a job and hide every single edge in there without it looking like I did that, because it could look like a bunch of straight lines, but I've done this long enough to know how to break it up. But I recommend you don't try to hide your defects with texture. Fix your defects if you know they're there, and know that the texture will help disguise it a little bit. The heavier it is, the more it breaks up the light and the shadow. You won't see the bad joints quite as easily, but it's not a miracle. It only does a little bit. So best thing I've always found is do a really good job, then texture it if you're going to texture it, and call it good instead of trying to fix things with texture. Now, if you're doing a level 5, that's a different thing. You sand it down a little bit more, and then you knock all the dust off and skim coat it, and that becomes your final really smooth coat. You'll have to sand it with like 220 grit, but then you finally go over that and fix any minor defects like bubbles and pinholes and things, and then you're usually going to have to sand those one more time. And I covered that in a video about doing level 5. Hey, if you got any questions, I try to answer short questions, but I honestly have a second channel going now too, and it's getting hectic. The other channel has grown by 1,000 subscribers on RV living out here, and it's grown that fast in just over a week. We've had, I think, 40,000 views on that channel. It's called That Kilted Guy Behind the Kilt, if you want to come check that out. In the meantime, I hope this helped you out. Hope you enjoyed the scenery. Comment below, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care, everybody.